11 spine-chilling midnight shift encounters. Horrifying realities exposed to haunt your sleep. The abandoned hospital loomed over the sleepy suburbs of Millfield, its shattered windows flashing reflections of a past riddled with sorrow. Sarah, an ex-paramedic, crowded into the tiny security booth each night, her heart heavy with the weight of her teenage daughter, Emily, who had started retreating into the silence of their new home. Bills screamed for attention, ghosts of her past floated through her mind, and as she settled into her shift, the cold air thickened with an unsettling anticipation. As she walked the dim corridors, the peeling paint seemed to breathe, whispering secrets about what had happened here. Shadows danced at the edges of her view, blurring the line between reality and her overactive imagination. Distant echoes, sirens, moans, faint cries soundtracked her every step, amplifying her anxiety, making her skin crawl. Each creak of the floor sent shivers down her spine, as if the hospital itself was alive and watching. The weight of loneliness pressed in, clinging to her like fog. She could almost feel it grip her throat. Not long into her shift, an unnatural chill swept through the hallway, wrapping around her like icy fingers. The shadows seemed to stretch, elongating into distorted forms that twisted and turned just out of reach. Panic tightened her chest. Was she losing her mind? No, she couldn't afford to think like that. She needed to focus for Emily. Keep it together, Sarah, she whispered into the darkness. The lights flickered ominously, and in that moment an unsettling thought crept into her mind. What if the rumors about Mr. Carter were true? The neighbor who had once been loved was now the chilling topic of whispered conversations. She shook the thought away like a bad dream, dismissing her paranoia. But the unsettling feeling settled like a stone in her stomach. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from a neighbor. Have you seen Emily? I think she's with Mr. Carter. A wave of dread washed over her, making her hands tremble. What was Emily doing with that man? She gripped the phone tightly, heartbeat racing. Protective instincts bubbled within her, blending with a fierce urgency. It was time to confront Emily about the friendship that could very well lead her into the arms of danger. As she pushed down the hall, the air grew thick. She heard laughter echoing from a door barely ajar. A cacophony of joy spilling through the cracks, inviting her to join whatever eerie festivity lay within. The warm glow from inside felt wrong, too welcoming in a place meant to be abandoned. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, her breath catching in her throat. She was drawn to it, dangerously tantalized. Then, as she stepped closer, a sudden crack rang through the building, startling her. The laughter ceased instantly. The sham of safety shattered. Heart pounding, Sarah turned to bolt back, but skeletal fingers sprang from the darkness to grip her wrist. Panic surged through her as she wrestled against the unseen force. There was no denying it now. Millfield was intertwined with shadows, and every comforting belief she held was unraveling. Not just for her, for Emily too. The night wore on, a predator stalking its prey, as Sarah fought against time and terror to reclaim the safety of her life and her daughter. The question remained, could she escape the looming reckoning, or would the darkness claim them all? The hospital whispered her fears, and the shadows seemed to grow hungry for the truth. With a jolt, Sarah yanked her arm free just in time, stumbling back into the hallway. The shadows closed in, curling around her like smoke. The lingering laughter from the room giggled mockingly, as if daring her to return. She spun around, steeling herself against the encroaching darkness. Each heartbeat echoed in her ears, drowning her thoughts in a tidal wave of fear. "Emily!" she called, her voice a fragile whisper. No answer. The walls seemed to absorb her words, leaving only silence in their wake. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead sputtered, casting erratic shadows that twisted and jived across the floor, reflecting her panic. She retreated further down the corridor, eyes darting to every corner, every doorway. The chill that had enveloped her faded momentarily, replaced by a deeper sensation of dread. Something sinister stirred just out of reach, lurking in the darkness, waiting for her faltering steps to lead her to its embrace. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being hunted, as if the very walls of the hospital were alive, holding their breath, anticipating her next move. Just then, she heard a soft, almost melodic humming coming from somewhere far down the corridor. The sound pulled at her like a thread she couldn't resist. It was soothing yet deeply unsettling, like a lullaby from beyond the grave. Each note hung in the air, wrapping around her, inviting and menacing all at once. Cautiously, Sarah edged toward the source, her heart pounding with each step. Was that Emily? The thought propelled her forward, driven by both maternal instinct and terror. With every inch closer, the humming grew louder and more distinct, luring her into the heart of the hospital's secrets. As she rounded a corner, the humming stopped abruptly. The silence smothered her like a thick fog, dense and suffocating. She glanced into an empty room, the remnants of old medical equipment rusting in the corners. A faint smell of antiseptic lingered, a ghost of what had once been a place of healing. "Emily!" she shouted again, panic bleeding through her voice. Then, in the stillness, she heard a faint rustling sound, followed by a muffled thud. A chill rippled down her spine. Then, from the corner of her eye movement, a shadow detached itself from the wall and darted into the next room. Without thinking, Sarah bolted after it, the adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She burst through the door, the hinges creaking in protest, ready to confront whatever waited for her on the other side. What she encountered was not what she expected. A small figure hunched in the corner, framed by the dim light, clutching something against their chest. Sarah's heart seized. The dread that had settled in her stomach twisted sharply. Was it Emily? "Mom?" A raspy whisper broke the silence, pulling her in like a siren's song. But the voice was not right. The pitch quivered with an edge of something dark, something not fully human. She took a step forward, her breath hitching, fear colliding with hope. "Emily, is that you?" The figure turned slowly, shadows deepening their features. The air grew colder, and she felt an unseen presence envelop her, thick and suffocating. "Mom, help me," came the voice again. But this time, there was an echo, something more haunting lurking beneath the surface. Sarah's skin prickled with dread. The room felt like it was closing in, walls shifting, tugging at her sanity. She stepped back, a chill gnawing at her insides, and the figure inched closer, the darkness around them pooling like water ready to swallow her whole. In that moment, the walls seemed to whisper a warning. And then she heard it, a low, guttural growl rising from the depths of the room, echoing along the corridors, a sound that was primal and raw. Now the question loomed: would she find her daughter, or was she drawn into a trap set by something far more sinister, willing her to lose herself entirely? Sarah stood frozen, caught between dread and determination, the shadow extending its grasp for her, and time was running out. The growl echoed, reverberating like a death knell. Sarah felt her breath hitch as the darkness twisted, thickening around her like a living entity. Panic gripped her throat. She couldn't stand there, rooted in fear. Every instinct screamed for her to escape, but that voice so eerily familiar wrapped around her heart like a vice. "Emily?" she croaked, though part of her feared what she'd find. The figure shifted closer, the contours of its small body now sharper, more vivid. A pair of eyes glinted in the dim light. They were wide and filled with sorrow, yet something else flickered behind them, a darkness that chilled Sarah deeper than the hospital's shadows. "Mom, please," but it wasn't her daughter's voice. This was a distorted imitation, a mockery of innocence. Each word dripped with an unsettling resonance, like a misplayed record. "Stay back!" she shouted, using fear as her shield. She stumbled backward, heart racing, desperate to put distance between them. The figure halted, a hesitant twitch, and then it lunged forward. Sarah turned and sprinted down the corridor, guided only by instinct. The growling grew louder, a primal anthem that urged her to flee. She didn't dare look back. but she could hear the scuffling of feet, a nebulous form pursuing her, driven by hunger or some twisted purpose. Suddenly, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered violently, plunging the corridor into chaotic bursts of light and darkness. Shadows danced along the walls, treacherous shapes shifting and beckoning, warping her surroundings. Eternal, the voice echoed down the hall, each syllable stretching into eternity. It was not one voice but many, overlapping, a chorus of the damned that pressed against her sanity. Sarah rounded another corner, hesitating for just a moment. Ahead was a door marked by the same rust and neglect that clung to the rest of the hospital. With no time to contemplate her options, she yanked it open and slipped inside, the door slamming shut behind her. Inside, the room was stark empty save for a single window partially boarded up. Slivers of moonlight graced the floor, revealing shards of glass littered like forgotten memories. She leaned against the wall, forcing herself to breathe through the panic rising in her chest. The low growl had faded into the distance, but she knew it wasn't over. Silence cocooned her, thick and oppressive. "Mom," the whisper broke the stillness like glass. Her heart leapt again. It had come from the darkness in the corner of the room. "Emily?" she called, then cursed her own fear-fueled impulse. What if this was a trap? What if the shadows had conjured some cruel illusion, using her daughter's name to lead her deeper into despair? "Help me," the voice dripped with desperation, chilling and pleading, and once again, it twisted her insides. The boards creaked. Something was moving, edging closer. Sarah's grip tightened on the door handle, the only barrier between her and the truth she was both terrified and desperate to uncover. With a flicker of courage, she stepped toward the source of the voice, each step a battle between hope and terror. The darkness seemed to pulse and shift, coiling around her as she approached. The moonlight illuminated a small, hollow-eyed figure, still huddled in the shadows. It looked like Emily, yet felt wrong, something wicked lurking just beneath the surface. Then, without warning, the walls vibrated, a deep, resonating growl echoing anew. "Mom!" It screeched, but the voice was a cacophony now, merging with others ridiculing, haunting a chorus that threatened to consume her. She staggered back, eyes wide with horror. The figure was not alone. The shadows were writhing, forming grotesque shapes that merged into a twisted parody of the life she had known. Sarah, the growl morphed into a familiar tone, evoking memories of laughter, of warmth. A voice synced with her heart's longing and deepest fears. "Get away," she breathed, the cold grip of despair tightening around her heart. And as the shadows advanced, she realized she was faced not just with the terror of the unknown but with an unspeakable choice: fight for her daughter's safety, or join the shadows willingly, into their eternal embrace. Somewhere outside, a door creaked open, bringing a sliver of light into the dark. But which path would she choose before they swallowed her whole? The air grew heavier, thickening with the sense of impending doom. Sarah pressed her back against the door, straining to keep the unknown at bay. The whispers grew louder, melding into a chaotic sound, an echo of anguish that clawed at her sanity. "Mom," it begged, laced with a simmering malice that pulled in her stomach. With sheer determination, she turned, a desperate move driven by the need for clarity amidst chaos. Shaking off brutal memories, she tried to remember the way their lives had spun with joy. "Emily, I'm here," she called out, forcing the quiver from her voice. But what was the truth? Was Emily still alive somewhere, or had the shadows fully consumed her? The distorted form shifted once more, now cloaked in deeper shadows, lurking just outside the edge of the moonlight. It leaned against the wall in a way that seemed impossibly unnatural, limbs twisting awkwardly. "Help me," the request was urgent but bathed in an unsettling echo that consumed the warmth of its meaning. The boards creaked again, and something scraped across the floor. Heart thundering, she took one hesitant step, then another, her feet finally crossing the threshold into that unsettling light. "Mom!" The sound twisted into a wail, a knife slipping into her gut. It twisted her heart, urging her forth yet holding her frozen. As she strained to see, everything about the figure morphed before her, the delicate features of Emily transformed into something grotesque and hollow beneath the surface. Nothing remained of the innocent laughter she cherished, Instead, it replaced itself with gnashing teeth that glistened with malice. "Stay back!" Sarah shouted, fear spilling over, pushing her back against the door once again. Her thoughts spiraled. This might be the final choice: continue towards that figure or flee into the unknown darkness of the hospital. Behind her, the faint sound of footsteps echoed, a reminder that danger still lurked beyond the door. "What do you want?" She braced herself, arms trembling. The shadows continued their dance as the air thickened. The voice morphed into a chorus again, melting into one another until it became indistinguishable. "Mom, you have to choose," the urgency in its tone tightened like a noose. Anxiety surged inside her, making her feel trapped, cornered. Images flooded her mind: Emily's laughter, bedtime stories, and those small moments of bliss that had been taken from her. "Choose," it hissed, the shadows swirling faster now, a cyclone of darkness. She swallowed hard, terrified of what came next. Would she fight through the shadows, or would she abandon all hope to save her daughter? "I want to let you take her," Sarah shouted, the sound empowering her, forcing the fear into a tiny corner of her mind. With fierce determination, she reached for the light filtering through the gap in the boards. Perhaps it harbored a way out, a way to break the binding chains of despair. As she clasped the edge of the weakened wood, the walls pulsated like a heartbeat, thrumming with energy, pulling her back. The voices joined in one final discordant roar, eternal, and then, right before she could push through, a cacophony of figures surged at her from the shadows, all twisted and contorted, some reflecting faces she recognized. Each one pulled fiercely, wrapping around her limbs, tugging her toward the dark depths. With every ounce of strength, she screamed, "No!" The door burst open, slamming against the wall, flooding blinding light into the room. She didn't know what she would step into, but this, she thought, had to be better than surrendering to the abyss behind her. But as feet stumbled forward into the brightness, she heard it. "Mom, why didn't you come sooner?" The darkness recoiled, and for a moment, clarity bathed Sarah's heart in warmth. But the chill of uncertainty loomed near as the corridor quaked beneath her. What was waiting for her on the other side of the door? With hope fragile as a shattered mirage, she could only think, if she stepped outside, what sinister truths awaited in the light? One final shudder rippled through her as she crossed the threshold, and with that, everything paled in comparison to the darkness chasing after her. The moment Sarah stepped into the corridor, her breath caught in her throat. The gleaming linoleum tiles stretched out beneath her like a winding path lined with uncertainty. The light from the flickering fluorescent bulbs casting long, distorted shadows danced as if mocking her. Every footfall echoed against the stark, white walls, whispering secrets she wasn't ready to hear. "Emily?" she called, her voice a mere quiver lost in the void. The silence loomed heavy, pressing down on her, every heartbeat a drum of impending fear. Could her daughter be here? Or was it yet another cruel mirage birthed from grief and darkness? A flicker of movement caught her eye. Just at the far end of the corridor, where shadows stretched like grasping fingers, she saw a silhouette. It flickered and morphed, unmistakably resembling her little girl. "Mom!" it cried, a desperate plea woven with threads of sorrow. But the voice. It dawned on her that this wasn't her Emily. It echoed with an unsettling timbre, laden with the weight of loss. She hesitated, desire pulling her toward that figure and fear churning in her gut. What if she moved closer? Would she find her daughter beneath this mask of deformity? "Sarah," the voice whispered her name, wrapping around her like a shroud. Control over her limbs faltered, a strange compulsion urging her to step forward. Each step felt like walking deeper into a grave. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back. Yet she lingered, captivated by the anguish hiding behind the illusions. Suddenly, a harsh clatter erupted behind her. She spun, heart racing, as shadows pooled in the doorframe. Figures surged forward, their bodies elongated and twisted in grotesque interpretations of the familiar. They reached for her, grasping hands clawing at thin air. "Leave me alone!" Panic flooded her, surging like ice through her veins. She sprinted down the hallway, dread coiling tighter with every step. The fluorescent lights flickered chaotically, mirroring her frantic heartbeat. The cruel laughter of the shadows pursued her, reverberating in the stillness. Then she heard it, an unrelenting thrum resonating in the walls, a pulse beneath the surface that resonated with the fear strangling her breath. Each beat echoed the cries from beyond, as if the hospital itself was alive and hungry. "Mom," the echoes of multiple voices cascaded from the shadows. "Help us, don't leave us." Images rushed into her mind, memories that didn't belong to her. Faces of children who had vanished, their silent pleas clawing at her sanity. Had she stumbled into their nightmare? No! She screamed, pressing her hands against her ears, desperately trying to block out the cacophony. She ran, her footsteps slapping against the cold floor, seeking refuge, seeking the end of this dark corridor. But as she turned the corner, the walls warped before her, dragging her thoughts into an abyss. Darkness loomed, hungry shadows billowing out to consume everything she was. Each step felt like wading through molasses. Time had lost meaning, stretching on into eternity. In a sudden flash of light, she stumbled into a small, dimly lit room. Throwing her back against the door, she took a moment to catch her breath. Glancing around, she could barely make out the outlines of medical equipment shrouded in dust. Old charts hung limply on the walls, but the air felt thick, loaded with the weight of forgotten screams. But then something moved. In the corner, the air stilled with apprehension. A figure, shrouded in darkness, faced her. Its outline pulsed like a dying ember, the face twisting into a grotesque semblance of familiarity. "You shouldn't have come here." The dread settled in her core, slow and cold. She felt the pull of temptation, the urge to understand what this thing wanted. As it began to step closer, an all too familiar sound resonated, a soft giggle echoing from the past, the same laugh she had cherished. "Mom, let us play." Sarah's heart sank as reality warped again. Who was playing? Was it Emily? Or something far more sinister? The walls rattled, the shadows pressed in, and she knew. She had to run again, but which way could she escape the labyrinth of horrors intertwining her fate? With nowhere else to go, she took a step forward, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from me?" As the figure dissolved into a whirl of shadows, it replied, "You'll never know until you lose everything." In the encroaching silence, her mind screamed for clarity. But clarity had long since abandoned this place, leaving her with an impending dread. Would she find salvation, or were the ghosts of this hospital conspiring to drag her deep into their darkness? The soft giggle echoed in her ears, a haunting melody that tugged at a string deep within her heart. Instinctively, she took a step back, scanning the room for an escape. The thick silence felt sticky, like molasses, as if the air itself was pressing against her, urging her to stay. "Emily?" The words slipped out before she could stop it, a fragile prayer hanging in the abandoned room. But the figure remained motionless, its shadows twisting like smoke, morphing into grotesque forms that suggested both familiarity and horror. She felt the walls closing in again, drawing her thoughts back to the memories of her daughter, endless laughter, the smell of fresh crayons, tiny hands wrapping around her finger. The warmth of those memories clawed at her even as uncertainty threatened to swallow her whole. "Mama, please." It was the voice again, but shadowed and tainted, dripping with sorrow. The flickering light made it hard to discern whether it was the longing of a child or the echo of something malicious. She turned her back to the shifting figure, ready to bolt, but the walls moaned a warning, as if sensing her hesitation. A quick glance back revealed the figure now towering in the middle of the room, its face obscured, yet she could almost feel its eyes boring into her soul. "Don't you want to see her?" it hissed, the voice warping into a chorus of whispers, all of them crying out, all begging. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, the sound of her own voice fueled by a sudden surge of desperation. "You're not her! Where is Emily?" Each question hung in the ether, silencing the laughter for a brief moment. The room felt alive, thrumming with a palpable energy, a heartbeat lurking beneath the floor. The walls pulsed in tandem with her racing heart, and she could hear it now, the sound of children laughing, their joy mixed with something dark. It was a sickening melody, and it filled her with terror. Without thinking, Sarah lunged for the door, her hand outstretched, ready to escape. But before she could touch the handle, the air shifted, Tendrils of shadow snaked out, wrapping around her wrists like icy shackles. She yelped as the figure surged forward, now a mass of writhing darkness, a smirk spreading across a face that wasn't quite human. "Stay and play," it crooned, "or lose the only thing you have left." A shudder rippled through her, the fear of losing everything she cherished driving her to fight. "Let me go!" she screamed, the words tearing from her throat. The shadows tightened their grip, pulling her back against the door. The whispers crescendoed, drowning out her thoughts. "You have to choose, Sarah. Or all will be lost." The choice hung heavy in the air, an impossible dilemma. Fight for her life, or abandon her search for Emily? Did she have the right to even consider one over the other? The darkness constricted, and visions of all the lost children shimmered around her like rotten autumn leaves. With each new face, her resolve trembled. "Please," a tiny voice called out, cutting through the chaos, drifting like a whisper through the dark. Her heart lurched. Was it really Emily? With a surge of adrenaline, she tore herself away from the shadows and the smirking figure. Twisting and turning, she dashed through the darkness, lunging toward the only light she could see, praying it wasn't another trick. As she ran, her thoughts became frayed. "I must find her." The corridor stretched ominously ahead, like a wormhole leading deeper into madness. But no matter where she turned, the shadows were chasing, echoing her cries with their own twisted laughter. "You can't escape us, Sarah." Each step felt heavier, dragging her down as if the very ground beneath her was a trap, ready to consume her. Then she saw something ahead, a flicker of hope. A door slightly ajar, light spilling from within. She rushed toward it, but the shadows surged, reaching for her as if to warn her of a lurking danger. Would this door be her salvation, or the entry into something far worse? In those final moments, as she crossed the threshold, rage and fear ignited inside her. Would running forward break the curse, or plunge her deeper into the dark? Her heart thundered as she stepped through, the overwhelming sound of laughter echoing behind her fading slowly. What awaited her on the other side? The answer teetered on the brink of revelation, a question echoing in the back of her mind: was this doorway an escape, or the final trap laid by luring shadows? The light enveloped her, a cocoon of brightness amid the consuming darkness. For a fleeting moment, hope surged, pulsing like a drum in her chest. But as Sarah stepped fully into the room, the brightness quickly flickered, revealing a scene that plunged her right back into despair. The walls were lined with photographs. Children faces she recognized, but names she could not remember. Their smiles seemed frozen in time, yet their eyes spoke of something unsettling. Each snapshot promised a story, but each was marred by an unsettling aura. Underneath the cheery smiles, shadows lingered, distorting the joy into something grotesque. "Mama, you came!" The voice drifted from the corner of the room, soft yet chilling. It was her daughter, the very essence of innocence. Emily stood near an old, dust-covered toy chest, her hair glowing in the feeble light. But when Sarah rushed toward her, the shadows flickered, darkening the space around her. "Emily, oh thank God!" She reached out for her, but the moment her hand brushed the air between them, it felt as cold as winter's breath. The little girl's face morphed slightly, a tremor of fear rippling across it. "Mama!" Emily's voice cracked, and the shadows drew nearer, distorting her image. "You have to leave. They want you to." The grin that broke across Emily's face faded to a grimace, and in an instant, the laughter turned to a shrill wail. The pictures on the wall twisted, their glassy eyes turning shades of horror, mouths opening in silent screams. They all cried out at once, words tumbling over one another, creating a cacophony that echoed inside her mind, threatening to shatter her sanity. "Run!" Emily's voice pierced through the chaos, thin but powerful, snapping Sarah to attention. But where could she go? The door behind her vanished, swallowed by an apparition of darkness, sealing her in this room of nightmares. The shadows grew denser, reaching for her with claw-like hands, and she could feel cold fingers brushing against her skin, pulling her toward the darkness that lurked at the edges of the light. Panic surged, her breath quickened. This was not freedom, this was a trap. "No!" She spun around, her heart racing as she grabbed for the toy chest. "Emily! Help me!" But as she pulled the lid open, expecting to find her daughter inside, a wave of heat washed over her. Inside lay something twisted dolls with eyes that seemed to blink, each one wearing the same frozen smile that marked the photographs on the walls. They were not toys. They were relics of the lost children, each meant to keep something sinister alive, to hold the souls of the forgotten. The shadows hissed, tightening their grip around her, trying to pull her into the abyss that loomed behind. "You can't save them, Sarah," they taunted, their voices curling around her legs, wrapping her in dread. "No! Emily is still here. I will save her." She fought the darkness, desperation sharpening her resolve. This was her child. She could not succumb. With a surge of strength fueled by love, she grabbed for one of the dolls. The moment her fingers touched its porcelain skin, it shuddered in her grasp. Eyes widening, a glimpse of the lost child it was meant to represent flashed before her. "Help me!" it whispered, echoing Emily's plea. But before Sarah could react, a sharp pull yanked her backward, a blinding light erupting from the doll, casting brilliant beams that pierced the shadows. "No!" The darkness screamed, thrashing against the warmth. And then silence. The room faltered, the light began to fade, and Sarah felt herself tumbling into nothingness, the air around her thick with uncertainty. As she fell, visions of Emily flashed before her again, her laughter, her smile, all interspersed with the cries of the lost. What was this place? What was real, and what was a mirage meant to torment her? When would she find her daughter? And could she still save her before it was too late? The weight of the looming shadows pressed deeper, ready to feast on hope once again. Sarah crashed into a new space. It felt cold and damp, like being plunged into a pool of ice water. As she scrambled to her feet, disoriented, she realized she was in a narrow, dank corridor. The air was heavy with mildew and despair. The shadows here were different. They danced with a life of their own, pulsating against the crumbling walls, mocking her. She took a step forward, the sound of her footfall echoing like a death knell. The corridor stretched endlessly, illuminated by flickering lights above that buzzed angrily. Each flicker seemed to taunt her, reminding her of the brightness that had captured her moments before. "Emily!" she called out, her voice trembling. No reply. Just the sullen hum of shadows whispering words she couldn't quite understand. Sarah moved cautiously, each breath a ragged whisper. She felt the weight of eyes watching her from the corners, a chill creeping down her spine. The photographs from the earlier room had been merely an introduction. Here, in this corridor, she could sense the restless souls, the forgotten, lurking just beyond her sight. Suddenly, she caught sight of a shadow slinking along the wall to her left. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Who is there?" she demanded, her voice echoing in defiance. But the darkness was unyielding, swallowing her words. "Mama," came a soft, muffled cry, eerily reminiscent of Emily's voice, yet distorted, like a record spun too fast. The sound sent a sharp thrill of hope and dread through her. Was it really her daughter? Or a cruel illusion meant to lead her deeper into the trap? The corridor began to twist. She blinked, and the walls appeared to stretch and constrict, warping and writhing before her like a living entity. Was this the darkness playing with her mind, or had she truly stumbled into some realm of nightmares? "Emily!" Sarah shouted again, desperation infusing her tone. With each heartbeat, the uncertainty surged. She was a moth drawn to the flickering light of her child's voice, oblivious to the danger surrounding her. Then, a door appeared at the end of the corridor, its surface slick and glistening, almost inviting. Sarah sprinted towards it, propelled by instinct. The whispering intensified, and a series of cries echoed behind her. "Mama, don't leave me!" They were not just voices of one, but a chorus of despair, children pleading in agony, the resonance wrapping around her like a noose. As she reached for the handle, a low growl rumbled from the shadows, as if they were awakening, furious with her defiance. The air thickened, heavy with the sense of impending doom. The door loomed large, but the shadows snaked closer, their breath hot on her neck. "No!" Sarah cried, flinging the door open. Behind it lay an empty void, darkness swirling like a storm, alive with the anger of the lost. And in the center of it, she spotted her Emily, suspended in midair, trapped inside a bubble of darkness, her face twisted in fear. "Help me, Mama!" Emily called, but the shadows pulled tighter, threatening to swallow her whole. In that heartbeat of choice, Sarah felt the gravity of her decision. The shadows demanded a sacrifice, their whispers promising liberation, but at what cost? Could she risk everything to save her child? "Emily!" she screamed, launching herself into the void, the darkness threatening to consume them both. And as she entered, a voice called out from the depths, chilling her to the bone. "You can't save her, you'll become one of them." The darkness snickered, and Sarah's last thought before being engulfed was the image of Emily's face radiant, yet slowly succumbing to the shadow's grasp. Was her love enough to shatter the dark, or would she be lost forever, joining the wails of the damned? Would she find a way to rescue her child, or was this the end of all hope? As the void closed around her, she was left with the echo of her daughter's fading cries vibrating in her soul, sealing her fate in an eternal struggle against the night. The void swallowed her whole, pulling Sarah into a swirling abyss where time and space twisted beyond comprehension. Her body felt weightless, yet she could sense the cold grip of the shadows tightening around her. Every scream that morbid echo wrapped around her like chains, and she feared it would drown out her will to fight. Then, the darkness splintered. A fractured glow burst through a golden thread illuminating a small circle in the gloom. There, she saw Emily again, her face pale against the night, her eyes wide with terror. "Mama! Please!" Emily's voice trembled, the despair clawing at Sarah's heart. The shadows writhed around her daughter, as if sensing the strength of a mother's love. "You have to save me! Hang on, baby! I'm coming!" Sarah cried, reaching out. She could almost touch Emily, her fingertips mere inches away from brushing against her daughter's cheek. But a shrill laugh pierced the suffocating darkness, cold and mocking. "You think you can save her?" The voice slithered through the air, twisting around Sarah's mind like a snake. "Many have tried. They are all ours now." "Who are you?" Sarah shouted, ignoring the dread rising like bile in her throat. "Just a humble keeper of nightmare," the voice replied with a twisted glee. "And you, dear Sarah, are quite the guest. So much love, so much despair, you will make a splendid addition to my collection." Sarah recoiled. She felt the voice burrowing into her consciousness, like a black vine creeping through her veins. "No! I won't let you take me." She planted her feet firmly, grounding herself against the seductive pull of the darkness. With a fierce determination, she charged forward toward the glimmering light. The shadows hissed, snapping at her heels, clawing at her clothes as if they had teeth. "Join us," they whispered in a chorus, their voices merging into a haunting symphony of despair. "Emily!" Sarah yelled again, pushing against the oncoming tide of darkness. Her heart raced, each beat pounding louder than the whispers, a rallying cry against the creeping evil. As she neared the circle of light, the walls of darkness shifted around her, coiling tighter, like a noose closing in. She could barely breathe, the oppressive weight of despair pulling her down. "Stay with me, Emily!" She drew a deep breath, fueled by her daughter's fear. With one final lunge, she grasped Emily's hand, that warm, fragile touch igniting a fire in her heart. "I won't let go! I love you, Mama!" Emily's voice was raw, filled with sheer desperation. In an instant, the shadows screamed, a cacophony of rage and loss erupting from every direction. They clawed at Sarah, but she held tighter to Emily, focusing on the warmth of her child's presence. Then, in a flash of blinding light, they were pulled away, hurtling back toward the shadows that had entangled them. The force felt like ice slicing through her very soul, sending tremors through her body. As they emerged from the void, the darkness roared in fury, its tendrils thrashing, trying to reclaim its prize. Sarah's vision flickered, the world around her splashing back into focus. They landed hard, tumbling onto a cold, hard floor. Looking up, Sarah found herself in a new chamber, the air smells moldy and familiar. But Emily was beside her, her face still pale, still terrified. "Mama, it wants us back." The urgency in her voice sent a jolt through Sarah. She scanned the room, her heart hammering. Old wooden doors lined the walls, their edges chipped and decayed. Shadows hunched around each doorway, waiting, watching. Sarah felt the palpable tension in the air, an unsettling promise of danger too close to ignore. The shadows pulsated, curling around the door frames like hungry beasts. She knew they couldn't stay, the darkness would come after them, relentless in its pursuit. "Quick! We need to find an exit," she urged Emily, her voice trembling but urgent. They stood together, a team forged by love and terror. But as they moved toward the nearest door, a single chilling breath whispered through the air, sending a chill down Sarah's spine. "You may have escaped, but you can never leave." The shadows surged forward, hungry for retribution. Sarah felt their icy fingers clutching at her ankles, dragging her back toward the waiting void. "Run!" she screamed, pulling Emily behind her as they dashed toward the nearest door, the promise of sunlight beyond turning to a nightmare once more. Would they find their way out, or would the darkness consume them entirely? Time slipped away, and Sarah could only hope love would guide them to safety. But what lay behind the next door could change everything. What if it wasn't just shadows that awaited them? The door flew open, and light flooded into the darkened chamber, engulfing everything in a sudden, blinding brilliance. Sarah grasped Emily's hand tightly, pulling her forward, driven by a visceral need to escape the growing swarm of shadows that clawed hungrily at their heels. "Keep running," she urged, fear and determination blending into a powerful force. They dashed through the doorway, the world shifting around them as the light swallowed the darkness. As they stepped through, they found themselves outside, the crisp night air a perfect contrast to the suffocating atmosphere they'd escaped. Millfield lay before them, a quiet town blanketed in moonlight, peaceful and deceptively safe. "Mama, are we really free?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with both hope and fear. "Yes," Sarah breathed, a smile breaking through the remnants of terror that clung to her. "We made it!" But deep inside, a tremor of doubt echoed. Had they truly escaped? Just as that thought crossed her mind, the air shifted around them. Shadows clung to the edges of the street, pulling away from the light as if they were repelled by it yet still striving to reach out. Sarah's heart sank. The darkness was not gone, it lurked, waiting for a chance to reclaim them. They hurried home, urgency driving them forward with every step. Memories of laughter and warmth crept back in, tempting her to focus on the safety of their lives once more. But the whispered promises of the shadows clung to her, an unsettling reminder that darkness was hungry, insatiable. When they arrived at their front door, Sarah fumbled for her keys, her hands trembling as she finally pushed through into the comfort of their living room. She turned to Emily, her heart swelling with relief to have her daughter safe beside her. But Emily's expression betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "What if it comes back?" she asked, the innocence of childhood colliding with the harsh reality of their encounter. "We'll fight it together," Sarah replied fiercely, pulling her daughter close. "As long as we have each other, we'll be safe." That night they sat bundled on the living room floor, surrounded by the familiar chaos of their life, old toys, books, and photos. Every item felt like a barrier against the insatiable darkness beyond their walls. The shadows outside whispered, but inside radiated warmth. As the clock struck midnight, warm laughter filled the air, memories intertwining with the present moment. They shared stories, made plans for tomorrow, and wove a tapestry of resilience against the lingering fear that threatened to seep in. Then, suddenly, Emily stared past her mother, eyebrows knitted. "Mom, what is it, sweetie?" Sarah asked softly, her heart racing again at the unease in Emily's voice. "Look!" Emily pointed toward the window. Outside, the shadows were swirling, colliding into chaotic forms that twisted against the moonlight. They danced like a horror show beyond the threshold. Breathless, Sarah stood. She wrapped her arms protectively around her daughter. "You're safe here with me. Remember that." As the shadows began to close in, the energy in the room shifted. The once comforting atmosphere dissolved around them, replaced by an overwhelming tide of dread. With a sudden burst of courage, Sarah stepped toward the window. "No!" she shouted into the night, her heart igniting with an explosive force. "You wouldn't take us. We're not afraid of you." The shadows recoiled, momentarily halted by her defiance. For the first time, they showed fear, a reflection of their own uncertainty in the face of a fierce mother's love. And just like that, an idea sparked within her. "Emily, we have to burn the darkness away. We can do it together." "Together," Emily echoed, the brightness in her eyes rekindled. They dashed for the kitchen, determined to harness hope and light. They gathered candles, matches, anything that could illuminate their space and ward off the darkness looming outside. With Emily's small hands shaking, they lit the flames, small fires flickering to life, illuminating their sanctuary. The shadows outside stretched, twisted, and shrieked as they recoiled from the main force of warmth radiating from within. The whispers grew frantic, desperate. They feared the very light that pushed against their shadowy forms. "Keep going. We need more light," Sarah urged, searching the rooms for anything else that would ignite their sanctuary. Together, mother and daughter surrounded themselves with flickering candles, creating a ring of pure illumination that glowed defiantly against the creeping night. As they wrapped their arms around each other, Sarah felt the warmth of their shared resolve. The shadows slammed against invisible walls, roaring in fury. But their fury transformed, soon retreating useless against the shimmering light of a mother's love and a child's innocent energy. Slowly, as dawn broke over the horizon, the shadows faded into the corners of their street, expelled and defeated. Emily and Sarah sat together, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through their window. Glistening gold filtered into their home, casting away the dark remnants of the night. They had prevailed, emerging not unscathed, but triumphant. Hand in hand, with love, hope, and an unbreakable bond, they rose to meet the day, knowing the shadows would always linger, but now armed with a light that would keep them both safe. That night, they hadn't just survived, they had taken a step toward healing. And as they stepped into the sunlight, they knew they could face whatever came their way together. So remember this, dear viewers, no matter how deep the darkness, your light can shine brighter. If you enjoyed this spine-chilling tale and want to experience more incredible stories, you need to subscribe now. Smash that like button and feed the algorithm, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this conclusion. Incredible stories await, and only true fans know the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to hear your thoughts. Your support makes all the difference as we keep these shadows at bay and continue bringing you captivating tales.